Hi everybody, it's Ravy again. No Lee this week, just me. So I hope everyone is well. This week I'm going to be talking about AI. I meant to cover it last week, but kind of got sidetracked in my initial showing something quite cool and then ran out of time. So this week I'm going to be looking at Soldier AI and just talking you through it and some of the good bits, some of the functions you can use, and probably some of the things you can do with it that you're not aware of. I see Larry has made it into a stream before it starts. Good man. Hopefully you won't regret it. So let's look at Soldier AI. So we've got GameGuru, the usual place to find it. Right click, properties, local files, browse local files, and then look inside files, and all the scripts are in script bank. So we'll go into there and we're going to look at AI Soldier, which there's a few AI soldiers, but they're all based off the same one, which is this one. So this is the main one. How's Lee? No, it's not Lee, it's Dave, Ravy, or some other names that I'm called. No Lee. I couldn't take off Lee if I tried with his very odd accent. Although I've got an equally odd accent. Anyway, so Soldier AI, and we'll also open global because that'll be very useful. And firstly, we'll look at global because we'll be referencing a lot of things from here. And you can see with AI globals, there's a lot of variables and arrays. Anytime you see equals and the curly brackets, it just means that is an array, which can expand to massive sizes. But yeah, those are arrays. So these are the different built-in things that are used. So we're going to be seeing those once we look through Soldier AI. So I don't run out of time, I won't waffle on. We'll jump straight in and go straight into Soldier Init. I'll briefly go through some things, just if they're fairly obvious, because I want to get you onto some of the cool features that it does. So Soldier Init is just setting stuff up before the game starts. So this is pre-game. Everything is loaded in, but nothing is actually running. So this is the initial thing. So all these things here, like AI Soldier State, as you can see, come straight from here. These are the variables that we've set up to use. So we're setting that to patrol. But again, with Lua, you can kind of use variables in any way you like with Lua. You don't have to tell it what kind of variable it is. If it could be a string, it could be a float, it could be an integer, it could be something else. You don't need to tell it. It kind of works it out. So for Soldier State, we're setting it to patrol, and then we're just setting up some other things like pathfinding. We're setting to -1, just to let us know that we haven't got a path yet. And some other things I'm setting to nil, which is the same as null in C++, which basically means zero, nothing. So it means they don't exist or take up any memory. And then I'm setting some other things. Modulate speed is a cool one if you're doing AI, because if you set that to something like 100, and tell the character to move, they'll move at extremely fast speeds. So that can be handy for making AI a little bit different. Like if you've got a group of 5 soldiers and you wanted some to move at a slightly different speed, rather than everyone run at the same speed robotically, you can use modulate speed. Old health, we're setting that to 0. The reason I set starting health to nil is because the game hasn't actually started. We wouldn't know what the health was because there isn't any. So I'm setting that to nil so I can pick it up later on. In fact, down here you can see I'm checking. Setting the character to stand, and some other things, returning home and all that stuff, was just setting to 0. So we just basically, and then setting the character sound set at the end there, just to say it to use the character sound set. That's all it's doing. So just basically setting things to 0. The only two really that are important there is it's setting patrol as the initial mode, and path index to 0 to -1. So that's the init. And if we move into the main, first thing we're doing on that, because it's something we're always going to need to know is how far this enemy is from the player. So all we're doing here is getting the global player XYZ, the entity itself XYZ, and then doing a distance check. So player distance we can then use throughout the script. It will let us know how far we are from the player. The next thing we're grabbing is the object number, because there's two things. We've got the E that is passed in. That is the E stands for entity. That is the entity number, which is the number assigned to that particular entity in the level. But the mesh that makes up that entity is an object, and for dark AI that we're using, some of the AI routines, they require the object number instead of the entity number. So we're just grabbing it there so we can use it throughout the script. And then we're checking if health equals nil, because obviously once we're in soldier main, that means it's actually running at Quake Arena. Yeah. Rick actually made a multiplayer map, which is actually the best one I've played in GameGuru. It was really fun. So this big castle place, and we all ran at like, I don't know, about 300 miles an hour. It was really funny. I mean, you end up drowning quite a lot. You just run straight into the water, but it's really hard to actually shoot anybody. But it was really good fun. Anyway, I won't get distracted. So health is nil at the beginning. So now that soldier main is actually running, because soldier main runs once the game starts, we can then pick up the health. So we can just store what the enemy health is at the beginning. The reason I do that is because in the editor you can set the health to anything. So it's difficult to know whether an enemy has been damaged or not unless you compare it to what the original health was. So that's why I store it there. Then next bit, we're just saying where is the enemy at the moment, because it's again, because start is nil, we know it's right at the beginning. We can just set it to the original position of the entity. I did that because if the player moves out of range, or if the soldier is alerted and it can't find the player, it can just head back to where it was originally. So unless we stored it, we wouldn't know where that was. So then the actual proper script starts. So if soldier state is patrol, which is going to be at the beginning because that's what we've set it to, it's then going to try and find a patrol path. So you know the waypoint system in GameGuru, where you can put down a waypoint. What this basically does is check, am I right near a waypoint or a path? And if I am, then I'll patrol that path. So it means you can lob soldiers down and they'll automatically pick up the paths and just start patrolling them. So this is what this is doing. This is going through all the paths that there are and all the points on the path, checking that against where the player is, and then saying if it's less than 200 units, then I'm pretty close, I'll be on that path. And then it's checking it against, if it finds a closer one, it will use that. So it's just cycling through that, picking a path. So if it has found a path, then path index will be greater than -1. Because if you remember at the beginning, I set it to -1, which means I haven't found one. But this means it has. So it's gonna find that. Then if it has found it, then we can actually walk along it. So we're setting the character, we're modulating speed to 1, setting the character to walk so they don't run across it, setting the direction to 1, so it means that they'll go through the path top to bottom, and then just setting them off basically. After that, we're going to make him unarmed at the beginning because he's not in combat, so he'll be unarmed. Checking some other things here if he's returning home. So remember, we grabbed the original position. So if he is no, people don't wallhack, not in GameGuru, not yet. No, they don't wallhack. We have no holes in our walls. So yes, we're getting the start position there, and if the player is away from his starting point, he can walk back. If returning home is set to 1, which that can be set later on. So we'll move down again. So if path index is greater than -1, then he's actually going to walk along the path. And as you can see here, he's got where the path is and what the points are, so we can just iterate along it. Going direction 1, he's going along the path until he gets to the end. Then he'll turn around and go back the other way. So that's all that's doing. That's just telling him to go along the path. If he hasn't got a path, then he's just going to stand there, scratching himself, or fidgeting, or whatever. So we're still in a patrol. He's still not really doing anything. He's not in the fight. He's either walking along a path if he's next to one, or he's not doing anything at all, apart from fidgeting. So the next couple of things is aggro check and alert aggro check. So if we just jump down to them, because they're quite cool routines. So what this is doing is, imagine there's 3 enemies that are fairly close to each other, and you shoot the one in the middle. It would be really silly if the one in the middle turned around, charged at you, and the other 2 guys just stood there, because they would notice, wouldn't they? So this is what this is doing: is if someone is alerted, it sets a position that that this is where stuff is happening, and it sets up position. So when you're checking this aggro check, you can say, am I near where the aggro is? And if it is, then you'll switch onto combat mode. So aggro means go straight into combat. So you've shot someone, or you're really close to someone, they've turned around, they've seen you, they're going into combat mode. Anyone else that's in close proximity, they'll also go straight into combat mode. Again, it will do some checks. It will play a sound, which is their little grunt, or whatever you want it to be, their on aggro sound, and then they'll go straight into aggro mode. And also you can see it's obviously setting them to run now, so it'll stop what they're doing, run, and off they go. Or the other aggro check is the alert one, which is similar, but that will just switch them into alerted. So you've maybe shot nearby, because we actually do pick up gunshots or explosions, that kind of thing. It does set off a trigger for AI that says they've heard something. So this is checking that if they've heard something and they've gone into alerted mode, this checks that. And if someone else is alerted and you're close by, you'll go into alerted too. So that's one way to move people off of the patrol mode, which is, oops, let's closed it down. Nice. So AI soldier, there we go. So let's move back to where we were, which was there we go. So aggro check and alert aggro check. So they're quite cool routines to use, because you can change the how far the distance is. You could do it that if you made one shot, the whole 500 soldiers would come chasing after you or something. But that's a good way of setting them off. Then next one it's doing is just checking it individually. It's saying, is the player very close to me, or this is where it's checking, has the AI heard a sound? Have I heard a sound? If that's the case, then maybe not go into combat, because you don't know whether you can see the player. You've just heard a noise, or the player's fairly close. So you're just going into alerted mode. It switches it to that, and then sets off alerted X and alerted Z, which is what's used by this aggro check for everyone else. So it says, I've gone into alerted mode, anyone nearby will also go into alerted mode. Then we're into alerted. So the AI cheats a little bit and looks at the player, even though the player may be behind a wall. But then it's doing a check to be fairer. It's checking PLR visible, which it stands for player visible. And if that's 1, that means that entity can directly see the player. They're not hidden behind a wall or anything. So it will do a proper check. If that's the case, it'll go straight into combat mode, play combat music, and then set the aggro positions. So again, for this routine. So any other entities that are nearby that maybe haven't seen the player, or the player's behind a wall as far as they're concerned, but this player's seen them. They've set the aggro, so the other ones will go into combat mode as well. So then we're stopping what it's currently doing. Our setting to control, we're just setting it to manual, because you can leave it on automatic, but if you want to do something in a script, you're best leaving it, switching it to manual. So we're then stopping the entity. It may have been fidgeting. Changing it to armed, because it was unarmed previously, and then setting it to run, so it's going to move a lot faster. But if it's not visible, then it's going to set a random kind of speed. This is where the modulate speed comes from. So it's going to move at a random between 100 and 130, divided by 100. So that'll be, that'll move at between 1 and 1.3, and then it's going to pick a random angle, and it's just going to have a wander around basically to see if what's all the commotion about, or what the noise was. So it's not seen the player, so we've just got it to go and explore. Of course, on that exploration, it may then come into line of sight of the player, which then it will move into combat mode. We're checking there if it's alerted. It's going to, if it's not played the sound, then it's going to play an alert sound if there is one. If there's not, it won't play a thing, but it's going to say play the sound. So if alert mode is 1, then look at player. Then we're doing a little OS clock is a lure function. So if it, after a certain delay, it's going to go into alert mode equals 2. So it'll switch it to another mode, which is going to, then it's had a look around, it's decided by that particular time it's not come into contact with the player, because obviously in alerted mode, if it ever sees the player, it's going to go straight into combat mode. So if after a couple of seconds it hasn't, it will then just go straight back to patrol mode. So you've shot, they've had a look around, you're behind a wall, it's not seen anybody, so it's just gone back to patrol, and it starts all over again. But if it is 1, then obviously it's going to go straight into combat mode, which will skip all this because it's doing a similar thing. It's checking if it's visible, then going into combat mode, and that's where the action happens. So in combat mode, it's going to look at the player. Obviously that's important. It's checking if the aggro entity is set to nothing. So if there isn't any aggro being set, then it's going to set it itself. So other soldiers around will then know that they can go straight into combat mode, and they can follow this player, this character, to know where the player actually is. So combat mode is originally set to 0 as soon as you go into combat. And what it's going to do there is set, again, it's going to set a random speed. Again, so people don't, so every single character is not running at the same speed at you. It will pick a random one, and it will run at that speed. And it's going to pick a destination where to run to. It knows where the player is. So we've got the global X and Z. We don't need the Y because we're on terrain, so we could ignore that. We just need the X and Z position. And we're going to pick a destination which is the player's position plus a random angle. So we've got a random angle we're picking here. So we're just basically going to pick a circle around the player to run to. So if the player is here, we're going to pick a random position around. So if you're here, you might run to there, you might run to there. You might try and flank him and run around there. Obviously the AI will automatically take into account, when it's moving to a position, any obstacles that are in the way. So any object that cannot be, any object that's static. So that'll be obviously buildings, fences, most barrels, things that aren't static. It will try and get round, or if they're very low, it will walk over them. So all that kind of stuff is automatically done. So you don't need to worry about how to plot the course. You just need to say, I want to go to here, and then the AI will work out how to get there, the shortest route. So we're setting a destination. what we're doing here is actually if we're checking if we could see the player, and if we couldn't, because this might be we might not be the one that saw it. So if we can't see the player, then we're just going to run straight at the player. Otherwise, we're going to go for this destination that we've picked. So we're going to set off a timer, which is one of our routines in the global. So we're starting the timer, so it will start at 0. Setting the character to armed, combat mode, then we're changing combat mode to 1. Then we're checking if we can move to cover. So if we can, then it will go to position of that cover and stay there for a random amount of time. This is probably one of the most important functions that you see, where we've got this where we're setting the destination here. AI entity go to position. That's the most important one for any of the AI stuff, and you can just make stuff move around on its own with just that. You could easily make any object follow the player by just saying AI entity go to position, and then just pass in into the object number, which, as you know, we got at the beginning, and then you could just put the player X and Z in, and it will just follow the player. But this actually sets it off. As soon as you do that, the AI will instantly come alive and head to that position, taking into account obstacles and all that kind of stuff. And then we just set in a delay, because we want it slightly random, between 250 and 500. If cover's 0, or if we are in cover, then we set it for a little bit longer. So we want to stay in cover for a bit longer. So we're going to target the player. If combat mode's 1, which we know it is by now, we're starting the timer off for it. We're setting another delay, again for how long we want to attack for. Then we're checking, can we still see the player? Because the player obviously is not just going to stand there. He might have run off by now, and he may have just peeked out, so he may have been hidden behind a wall. So we're just checking, is player visible? Again, that's an important one to see whether can I actually see the player. If we can, then we're going to fire at him. So that's what makes the enemies fire. Just fire a weapon. You can do that anytime you like, and it will fire the weapon, whatever they're holding. So if that's going to do that until our little delay has run out. Once our delay has run out, then we're changing combat mode to 2. So if we go down to 2, first I'm going to check, can I see the player? Yep. Then let's shoot at him again. Is the timer greater than the delay, or am I very close to the player? If I'm very close to the player, then set combat mode to 3. Otherwise, it's just going to keep shooting the player and moving towards the player. So on 3, we're setting it, making sure the character is set to armed again. Setting it to 4, and then we're setting a random delay, so we can pick that up once we've got into mode 4. So what mode 4 does is we've moved into attack. We've shot if we can. Maybe we haven't. Once it gets to mode 4, we're saying again, if we can see the player, let's shoot at him. If cover on, then let's duck. Then this is kind of the main attack thing, really. If we're past the delay now that we've just set, what we're going to do then is to go back to mode 0. So it's going to start the whole thing again. This is really cycled through the whole thing. So we've seen the player, we've run to a position, we've checked if we can see him. If we can, we've shot him. If we're behind cover, we've ducked. Then we get to 4, and we say once the time delays run out that we set, we'll then go back to 0 and start all over again. As you can see here, we're just setting it back to 0. It's all about delays, really, and shooting and running to. That's the main bit of it, just to make them feel like they're alive and doing something. So next one, if we're in mode 5, then we're in cover. So again, if we can see the player, we're going to fire a weapon. So we're always checking this. We're always checking player visible. If player visible is 0, then we know that we need to move towards him again. modulating speed again, putting it back to 1. If we're over that time limit again, we're setting combat mode to 0. So that means they're going to come out of cover, they're going to run somewhere else. If they're out of range, so as in they've moved right out of range, we're going to set them back to walk, unarmed. And remember I said at the beginning, we picked up the original start positions. We're going to get them to, begin with AO entity go to position. We're just going to say go back to your start position. Obviously, as you probably know, once you're out of quite a way out of range of AI, they will switch off anyway. So there's no guarantee that this character will make it back to its start place, but it will certainly try. It depends on how far the players run off, because to save speed and processing, etc., there is a certain distance that if you're quite a way away, then AI is just switched off, because you won't be able to shoot them, they won't be able to shoot you, and you're far too far away to do anything anyway. So they just get switched off and just turn back to standing. So it may this may get all the way back, but it may not. And again, we're setting a random speed, how quickly they go back. Then mode 7, we were unable to see the player, so we're going to head after them. So first we check, because maybe we can see them now. Originally we couldn't, so we're checking player visibility and firing the weapon if we can see them. But then, because we couldn't, we're going to head straight to them. Because perhaps there is a chance that the original position that we picked, that was around the player, that could be a wall in front of them. So they could have run there and realised they can't see the player. So they're just going to head straight to them if they can't see the player. If that makes sense. Then rest of it really is not really used. I think mode 9 is not really used for the strafing and stuff. We don't use that much anymore. But you can set the player character to strafe, and he will move left or right, as you can see. You can set him to move left and right again, and again it's checking whether can I see the player. This next bit is again checking old health. It's setting the old health to the health that we got at the beginning, so we know what health he started off with. Then combat mode 11, I don't think we're using those, so that's pretty much, those ones don't really matter because we're not really using those. But this one, if health is below 30, what that means is the enemy's got hurt quite a bit. We can check his health at runtime, so we know his health is less than 30, which means he's pretty close to dying. We're checking he's not going after the player, and he's not running for cover already. So if that's true, then he's actually going to run to cover. So you'll find there's often that enemies don't last long enough. When they get fairly low on health, they normally die anyway. You're going to shoot them, but there is a chance if he's managed to survive and he's just got a little bit of health left, he will actually run off. So he'll find the closest bit of cover. And again, this is automatic. AI move to cover. So that could be anything that's half height. So that could be like a wall that's half height wall, or it could be a building. It will basically check from where you are. It will find a piece of cover which means you can't see him, and the check obviously does is, will I be able to see the player from here? No, then I'll go there. So that's quite cool. We used to have this higher, and for fun, if you ever want to test that out, set that higher. So you could, if you set it to like, because most enemies tend to be 100 health, so if you set it to like 90, so I mean if they take any little bit of damage, you'll just see them run off scared and hide. So that's a quick way to make a big change to AI. If you wanted to have a to fight against a bunch of chickens, then set it to 90 or 99 or something like that. As soon as they take any damage, they'll be off and they'll run. And again, it's set in combat mode to 5, which will wait a little while, then they'll come back into the fight, sort of thing. And again, if they're out of range, entity view range, which is their maximum range that they can see. So we're saying if the player distance is 1.5 times what the AI can even see, then they just go back to combat mode 6, which will send them back home. And that's it. We come down to then our aggro checks, which I showed you earlier. And the last bit, soldier exit, which is called, obviously when it's going to exit the script, so when they get shot, it's going to play their on death and all that kind of stuff. So if there is an on death sound, that's when it'll play it when it exits. And that's it basically. That's a quick guide to Soldier AI. Hopefully you've picked up some tips and some interesting facts how to pull this apart, but you could basically strip this right down to go to position, check if you can see the player, shoot him. That's how you could start off a basic AI, and that would just be a very few lines. But obviously this is padded out more by checking for patrol routes, setting aggro for other players, for other enemies, running off if they're scared, going into cover if one is nearby, etc. So any questions on that? Or was that all clear? I managed to get through it. I tried to get it through as quick as I could. So hopefully there's been enough detail just to give some pointers. But a good tip is to look at these as well. All these here. They're all the variables and arrays that are set up that will be shared. All the arrays will be shared between all other enemies. So that's a good way of checking which, what other enemies are doing what, who's seen what, who's aggroed the player, etc. So no questions. I'll just wait a few seconds because there's always a little bit of a delay. If there's anything that you'd like to see covered in future broadcasts, do let us know. There's a thread on our forum. If you post there, I think Rick hopefully will have the link to it, but there's a thread on our forum. If you go to our site, you can post on that and put what you'd like to see, because maybe you'd like to see more scripting, maybe you'd like to see a certain type of scripting. How would you do this, or how would you do that in scripting, or how would you alter this to have this effect, or maybe you'd like to see something completely different. How do you do this in the editor? So let us know and we'll do it. And that's really it. So hopefully that's been interesting, and I will see you guys soon. So thanks for watching and take care.